I know exactly what you're gonna say. Bonehead, you made like 6 videos on Resident Evil 8. How have you not done a review for the game a month later? And the simple answer to that question is, I've written maybe 4 or 5 different scripts for the video. And I know I've done longer reviews in the past, like the Wind Waker video, like some that went on for like 45 minutes. I've done like 20-minute reviews, but I wanted to keep it in like the 10 to 15 minute range, just because, you know, it's easier to get along with when you're watching a video. And nothing I wrote was short enough, and writing something that short doesn't give all of the information I want to give. In this video, it's gonna be the same thing, except I won't be using a script to talk about this game. I am not gonna make all the points I want to make. I'm not gonna cover everything I want to talk about in the time I am giving myself to record this. I'm also not going to be showing anything from the start of the game or the end of the game. Any footage you see up in this little TV box here is going to be entirely like mid-game B-roll, because it's been a month, it's still very fresh, Resident Evil 8, and I know not everyone would have had a chance to have played it by now. So what you're going to be seeing is some new game plus, maybe just mid-game footage of me running around just murking werewolves. So enjoy that. Nothing I am going to talk about. None of the footage you will be seeing in the gameplay will have anything to do with what I'm talking about. It's purely there if you don't want to look at me while I talk. So the first thing I will say about Resident Evil 8 is, in my 2 videos where I discussed thoughts, theories and ideas, I didn't realise how wrong I was in the end. I was talking about like a Wesker making an appearance. I was talking about Chris being brainwashed by the cult. I talked about how he was mind controlled into stealing the baby from Mia. So I'm not going to be talking story spoilers, but I will give an overall opinion on the story. Again, under the reasoning of it's still a newish game, and I don't want to ruin it for people who are watching this just to see if the game's worth picking up. Spoiler alert, it is very much worth the money. So the basic gist of the plot is something that we had explained to us very briefly in one of the showcases, in which Ethan is out looking for his daughter Rose, who has seemingly been kidnapped by Chris Redfield. And the story takes us through several different locations as Ethan pieces together what's going on behind the scenes with why Rose was taken, the people who took her, and the resolution of if he gets her back, what happens to him, what happens to Chris. It's neatly wrapped up, most of the plot anyway. There are some things that aren't explained that I am fully assuming we will see in future DLCs for the game. The plot is campy, it's ridiculous at times. There are some very cheesy and off-kilter dialogue and comments from both Ethan and the rest of the cast, but this doesn't detract from the fact that this is a very easy story to follow until a little bit later in the game. It's inoffensive, it's simple, and it was a satisfactory story, so there's nothing to complain about here. The gameplay is where the game does shine, and there's a lot of comparisons to be drawn between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 8, and the obvious comparisons of Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 7, with that just being the recurring characters, the first person perspective. But one of the things people can't argue is just how heavily inspired Resident Evil 8 is by Resident Evil 4. One of the very first things that happens to you when you enter the village for the first time is you are in an ambush situation where a countless number of werewolf-like enemies are chasing you down. You then get the one big bad enemy, and it's more or less on a timer. They don't explain this in-game. I know speedrunners were having issues trying to figure out how to get past this, but from what I've understood, this whole intro section of being ambushed by a horde of enemies in the village is set to a timer. And it is very, very similar to the El Pueblo ambush at the beginning of Resident Evil 4. Again, Leon enters, he is attacked by a horde of basic enemies, Dr. Salvador comes out, which acts as this guy's big enemy, and it works off a timer. Or at least I'm assuming that's the case as well, as I have heard, but I have never actually looked into if there's like a kill limit as well. I'm not 100% sure, but this opening moment is very similar to Resident Evil 4. There are plenty of other comparisons to be made as well. Some of the environments, for example. Obviously, you start off in your village area, ultimately ending up in a castle. So again, this is the village against El Pueblo from Resident Evil 4, then going to Castle Dimitrescu to Salazar's castle in Resident Evil 4. There is an industrial area, which is very similar to Sadler's Island in Resident Evil 4, with the only one I can't seem to think of a direct comparison with is Moreau's swampy reservoir area, with the closest you can probably compare that to is the lake in the village portion of Resident Evil 4. The game has refined itself and expanded on some mechanics as well. The crafting mechanic from Resident Evil 7 is there. It's a little bit more... I can't tell if it's been streamlined or if it's been been expanded upon. You use your chem fluids to make your healing items. That's followed through and same as well. But bullets aren't made with chem fluid and powder now, they're made with gunpowder and scrap metal, which then can be mixed and matched to make handgun bullets, rifle bullets, shotgun shells. I think it's the one thing that the game, with how it presents itself, didn't need. Because even when I played on the Village of Shadow difficulty, I never found myself hurting for ammo. Even discounting the fact that you could craft ammo. Where it's followed the Resident Evil 4 way of doing things with enemy drops dropping ammo, treasure, money, all of that stuff, enemies tend to drop enough ammo for you to get by without really worrying about things. Not to mention the fact that you have the merchant as well, which you can also buy ammo from, which is something Resident Evil 4 didn't do. The closest you could do in Resident Evil 4 is buy a capacity upgrade for your weapon, which gave you a free refill on ammo. Resident Evil 8 does that as well. You have so many options on gaining and regaining ammunition that the game isn't hard. It is a very easy game, even on the higher difficulties. The only time I struggled in the game was when I did the knife only run. And that's because I was using a knife only. It shouldn't be the case. I think at the very least they should patch out Village of Shadow difficulty to give you less item drops, or crafting ammo requires more resources. But something does need to be done with just how plentiful ammo and healing items and explosives as well. There's like pipe bombs everywhere you go. There's landmines everywhere you go. The rarest ammo types are the grenades and magnum ammo, but then again you can buy them from the merchant, get them on capacity upgrades except for the grenades. It's just too much. It really is. It's something they could have toned down on. Because this is one of the main complaints I've seen, that Resident Evil has once again stepped away from the horror aspect that Resident Evil 7 put back in place, and has become more campy and over the top and action based. Which it has. Again, you cannot think of any other game other than Resident Evil 4 when playing Resident Evil 8. I mean, the general setup is kind of similar as well. Resident Evil 4 had Los Illuminados. Resident Evil 8 has this Mother Maria worshipping cult. I don't believe they ever gave her a name, like the cult a name, anyway. But the combat, again, is the highlight of the game. Aiming is very satisfying, the gunplay is very satisfying. Being able to block and then riposte an enemy by pushing them back, that's a good idea. One thing I didn't like in terms of how they managed the combat with enemies is, if an enemy got a good hit on you, instead of you just being knocked back, a majority of the time you would get an animation play where the enemy will slam their sword into you and then drag it out and push you back, or they'll take you to the ground in this really dragged out animation, especially when you don't get an option to escape from it. You can't mash a button, you don't have sub-weapons to jam a thing into their mouth. There's no grenades other than the pipe bomb. If you had a pipe bomb handy, or if you at least had one equipped, and you got taken to the ground, it would have been good to be able to shove a pipe bomb in a lycan's mouth, but that's just not there. It's not game breaking, it's not really an issue, especially when you've got better weapons and you're taking them down before they can get within like 10 feet of you. Visually, this game is incredible as well. My PC setup is not built for graphical fidelity. I often have to prioritize performance over visuals, but with Resident Evil 8 that wasn't an issue either. This game, even on medium settings, is genuinely stunning to look at. Now, I can play this game in custom setup with some options on ultra, some on high, and fiddling around with it, I did manage to have a consistent 60 FPS while having decent graphics. The only time I ever suffered frame drops, and again, from what I understand, this is something quite common that a lot of people went through, was when any of Lady Dimitrescu's daughters flashed onto the scene and caught you. Like, the sheer amount of flies that are on screen, even on low settings, like absolute minimum settings, when I checked it out, the frame rate just tanks. Like, people make the joke of, oh, it's a slideshow. It really was at points, even on low settings, but from what I understand, that is something a lot of PC players have run into. I don't think it is a small issue. I think it is something rather large scale, but performance-wise, the game ran smooth as butter, and it's one of those games where the atmosphere really does it justice as well. Like, when you first enter the village on an initial playthrough, there is a real tension, considering how Ethan entered the village and what happened to him before the initial ambush. You feel very underpowered, and that tension is great. But like I was saying earlier, the problem is that tension disappears the moment you get the shotgun, which is like 10 minutes after the pistol, and that can two-shot early game lycans. Again, the abundance of ammo as well, but by the midpoint, enemies aren't really a threat. Bosses aren't really a threat, and that's the biggest letdown. That doesn't detract from the game. Like, gameplay wise, if you just want a fun time, this is one of the better games for it. Speedrunning this game, I can get it done in just under 2 hours. I say just under, literally maybe like seconds under 2 hours. And I'm not a speedrunner. It was the same with Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 2 and 3. Like, I never employed fucking huge time-saving strats to get from one area to another. I didn't do like camera tricks, RNG manipulation. Just knowledge of the game and being able to just power through with some of the new Game Plus weapons. It really goes to show that your initial 8-hour playthrough was purely based on the exploration and your anticipation of what was going to happen. And then blasting through with an infinite ammo magnum just... oof. I know it may sound like I've spoken mostly negatively about this game, but that's because I've once again done that thing where I had astronomical, like unachievable expectations for this game. I had said so much stupid shit in previous videos, and then kind of convinced myself in a way that when none of what I predicted happened, I was kind of let down, but that's on me. Resident Evil Village has a simple story, yes. It's not fully concluded, and a sequel bait hard as fuck. But the next entry sounds to be pretty interesting, all things considered. Gameplay mechanics behind enemy drops, treasure acquisition, weapon upgrades and purchasing is game-breaking, not in a bad way, but if you're looking for a challenge, you're probably going to want to avoid ammo crafting and going up to higher level upgrades. The combat loop is satisfying, it's fun, it's engaging. And beating the game is when they introduce challenges to you, which lets you earn points, which you can then spend in a shop to unlock the mercenary mode, unlock concept art, a model viewer, bonus weapons, infinite ammo. I thought that was a good way of ending things. I thought that as an end game reward I thought it was quite brilliant. It gives you many reasons to replay the game. It gives you a cause to try new things, to push yourself to see if you can achieve this one thing just for those few extra points, just to buy that rocket pistol that you want that is ultimately a piece of shit. But Resident Evil 8, on the whole, being 100% genuine with anyone who watches this, was and is a great game. I've heard people like Under the Mayo say that it's a walking simulator with just ridiculous combat, and yeah, fair, it is. It's very linear compared to something like Resident Evil 2. But that shouldn't put you off experiencing this game. Capcom did a genuinely good job at a 7 out of 10 game at best. It's not perfect, it's not horrible, it's still above average. Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7 are by and large the superior entries in the franchise when compared to Resident Evil 8, but Resident Evil 8, you can tell there was a lot put into it that people who aren't fond of the series will use as their primary reasons of it being trash. But if you're not sure, if my words haven't convinced you, if reviews haven't convinced you, play the game. Make your own opinion on it, because I say this with every game I review, where I say I won't spoil the plot because I believe you should experience this. I could spoil the plot quite easily. Like, I don't feel bad spoiling the plot, because again, the story is just satisfactory enough. But a lot of people have waited for this game. There was a lot of anticipation behind the whole setup with Chris, that you should experience it. You should get your own emotional reaction from learning the twists. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed Resident Evil 8. I hope you plan on playing Resident Evil 8. Let me know what you thought about the game, what did and didn't work for it, if it was a waste of money in your opinion, if it was overhyped crap, or if it lived up to your expectations and was good enough. But either way, I will see you in the next video. Bye!